and Michael Steele, former chairman of the RNC and an MSNBC political analyst. Dana, peace talks are set to resume tomorrow between Russian and Ukrainian officials. The likelihood of Presidents Putin and Zelensky meeting face-to-face was dismissed by Russia. This comes at a time when Zelensky has to keep his country's morale high despite the casualties of war, economic despair, and civilian suffering. He also must retain the confidence of the West to ensure weapons keep flowing to Ukraine. On the flip side, your latest piece in the Washington Post speaks about Koch Industries, who have continued to do business with Russia, even as other Western companies pull out. You write, quote, the Koch posture towards Russia is consistent with longtime efforts by Koch interest to fight democratic protections in the United States. So Koch money doesn't just go to fringe pro-Putin Republicans. It flows to some of the mainstream of the party as well. Can we expect them to start giving it back?
That's a nice thought, Reverend, but doubtful. It is, I suppose, admirable, if you want to use that word, that Koch Industries is at least consistent in opposing democracy at home as well as abroad. But this actually has been a good news story in terms of corporate America in general. The vast majority of companies, some 450 multinationals, have pulled out of Russia, either in total or at least in part in some symbolic way. But then you do have Koch Industries that is not only continuing to do business as before in Russia, but is defiant about it. You have Koch interests out there arguing against the U.S. sanctions. So it's really an extraordinary thing to see this major American company working against what appears to be both the American foreign policies and the interests of the United States in this case. And in terms of negotiations that are to restart between Ukraine and Russia, it's very difficult, having seen the atrocities that Russia has committed, to think that this is going to be fruitful, that it's anything the Ukrainian people can get behind. It really looks as if it would be very difficult to make concessions when you just see the kind of obvious war crimes that are being committed, that are now revealed more than ever, that have been committed by Vladimir Putin.
Michael, let's turn to Donald Trump, who held a rally last night in Michigan. With the Republican primaries kicking off in about a month, it will be a barometer to see if Trump's influence still carries any weight. Ahead of that, he has surrounded himself with some of the most politically toxic members of the GOP, such as Michigan Secretary of State candidate Christina Caramo, who he allowed to speak for a significant amount of time last night. She also spoke at the Patriot Double Down QAnon conference in October. Trump has also appeared with Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz in Georgia. And next week he'll be with Madison Cawthorn in North Carolina. I mean, these folks aren't the Glenn Youngkin type candidates Republicans are hoping can make inroads in swing districts and battleground states. How does Trump benefit from aligning himself with this group?
Oh, he benefits immensely. I mean, unlike the Youngkin situation, who had, in the eyes of many, both inside and outside the GOP, perfected the Heisman move, you know, sort of creating some distance between him and Trump, while at the same time getting some benefit from Trump-based voters who liked his narrative on CRT and liked his narrative on parental rights. These individuals are fully embracing Trump and Trumpism. They can't hug him tight enough. The fact that he lets, you know, certain individuals, you know, particularly African-American individuals who are willing to not only espouse QAnon crazy and say the things that Trump liked to hear, but do so with such fervor and glee, only emboldens him and fills that particular cup that he likes to have continually runneth over, which is his ego. And so when you're looking at going into the upcoming elections, there's got to be serious analysis as to what benefit the party is gaining from this. And when you're looking at some of these elections, candidates that that are well poised right now to win some primaries, candidates who have already won some primaries, are not necessarily going to see victory come November, because how they translate to a very different electorate, a general election electorate, is not the way they're going to be playing in some of these primaries right now. And so at the end of the day, you have to measure that yardstick, which is what Mitch McConnell is doing. Of all the political leaders right now in Washington, he's the one who's got his eye closest to the House and Senate narrative about control. And he is not, as I understand, necessarily jumping up and down with some of the candidates that are being embraced by Donald Trump, because he knows full well in a general election they're going to be that's going to be a tougher fight for them than it otherwise could or should be.
Dana, tomorrow the Senate Judiciary Committee will vote on whether to advance Ketanji Brown Jackson's Supreme Court nomination. Right now, Judge Jackson is expected to have the support of all Democratic senators and at least one lone Republican, Maine Senator Susan Collins. And there's at least a handful of other Republicans considering voting in favor of her confirmation. Do you think this process has gone well for Democrats so far?
I would say this process has not gone well for anybody, because the Republicans have made an atrocity of it. After beginning by saying we're going to have a dignified process, it became all about these outrageous attempts to suggest that she's soft on pedophiles. I do think it went well for Judge Jackson. The fact that she's getting any Republican support at all in this environment is a good thing. And she was able to keep her cool when she was being hit over and over again with this the pedophile QAnon nonsense. She didn't get agitated, and I think that earned her a great deal of respect and helped with her image. So I think this process has been lousy for the Supreme Court and lousy for the country. It may or may not be good for the Democrats, but it's definitely good for Judge Jackson. She has comported herself very well, and a bipartisan vote at this moment reflects an unusually good outcome.
Michael, tomorrow the House Rules Committee is set to vote on whether to recommend the DOJ charges two of Donald Trump's former aides with contempt to Congress. Peter Navarro and Dan Scavino both have refused to comply with subpoenas from the January 6th committee. The committee is also seemingly moving toward recommending charges for Trump, but some lawmakers are skeptical. They're skeptical that Attorney General Merrick Garland will do anything with those charges. Listen to what California Congressman Adam Schiff said this morning on our air.
I think the Justice Department is erring on the side of not wanting to create controversy by investigating those that may have committed crimes, but nonetheless were high up in the last administration. I just don't think that's tenable. If there's evidence of crime, it needs to be investigated regardless of who it is.
How crucial is the Justice Department concerning the January 6th investigation? Are you optimistic that accountability will would happen by the end of the committee's report? Briefly, please, Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not optimistic. I think this Justice Department is rather timid. You, in your opening, expressed that timidity very well. They are looking at this because it involves Donald Trump and high-up government officials. They're nervous about what that may mean. Well, the only thing you need to be concerned about is what the law requires. And if the January 6th committee puts in front of the Justice Department credible evidence of wrongdoing and criminal activity, however that's linked up, they have a responsibility under their oath of office to pursue that evidence and to report back to not only the Congress but the country, who are waiting diligently for their analysis and what they're going to do. I'm not confident that this Justice Department is prepared to do that, because they're more concerned about how it looks politically and how it may impact and land politically than they are about Lady Justice standing there blindly doing her job.